Topic 1 Review. This video is designed to give you a couple extra tips or strategies that might help you on tomorrow's test. So let's get started. First thing that's really important is that you know the place value chart. So these are going to be important to know, and they're kind of easy if you think about it. It goes ones, tens, hundreds, and then thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s as you keep going. So you know that there's always that pattern of tens, hundreds, ones, tens, hundreds, and then ones, tens, hundreds. It just goes up to different numbers such as thousands and millions and billions and trillions. Over here, it's a little bit harder because instead of starting with ones, it starts with tenths. And the reason it does that is because it's looking at the smallest fraction that it can go to. So we have tenths. So there's this right here would be 5/10. And I'll show you in a little bit how we can identify the place value or the value of that number. So we have tenths, hundredths, then thousandths. And for this unit, we're not going any farther than that. If I were to say this in standard form, that's just the number right here. So 1,204 and 507 thousandths. That's exactly how I would say it. In written form, it just takes a little bit more paper to do, right? So we write out 1,204 and 507 thousandths. Notice the only time I wrote the word "and" was in place of the decimal point. Here is where a lot of us get messed up, is writing in expanded form. We take each digit, so we'll start here, or let's do it here. We have a 1 in the thousands, so that's 1,000. We write that here. And then we have a 2 in the hundreds, so 200. So we add that. There's a 0 in the tens, so there's no tens that we have to add. So we go to the ones, and there's 4 of them. So we add 4. And we're going to keep going. Now we have the decimal point, so now all of ours have to have a decimal point before them. So you go to 0.5 or 5/10. So we add that. The next one is a 0, so we don't have to add anything. We don't have to do anything to that. So we skip to the next one, which is 7 thousandths. So remember, we need to make sure we write 7 thousandths down here. So 0.007. Let's move on to the next section. Down here, we're going to convert mixed numbers and fractions into decimals. So let's start here. We have 3 and 11 hundredths. The first thing we do is we take our whole number and we move it over here. That's the only number that's going to be on the left side of the decimal point, right here. And then we have hundredths. So the first thing we do is we know that there's going to have to be 2 decimal spots. Because remember, looking back up at the place value chart, the hundredths section is the 2 decimal points. So I drew my 2 spots, and then I looked up here, and the number was 11, so I put 11. The next one will help us with another trick, and that's when there's only 2 digits on top. So let's look at this. We have 5, which is our whole number, so on the left side is going to be 5. And then we have 27 thousandths. Since thousandths is in the 3rd spot, I need to have 3 spots here. And so what I do is I put 27. Always starting way back here. So that's 27, and I put a 0 in front of it. If I put a 0 at the end, would that change it at all? Pause the video and think about that. Right. If I did put the 0 at the end, that would change it. It would be 270 thousandths. So good thing I put the 0 in front. The next one shows us tenths. I don't have any whole number, so I have 0 and 3/10. I'm only going to have 1 spot after the decimal, and I have a 3 as my numerator, so that spot is going to be filled with a 3. One little trick that you can look at, in all of these, the number of zeros that I had down here equal the number of spots that I have. I have 3 zeros here, so I need 3 spots there. I have only 1 0 here, so I have only 1 spot there. Now let's flip it around and go from a decimal to a fraction or mixed number. Since I have a number on the left, that's going to be the whole numbers, that's the ones, so that's going to go right there. Then I take everything I have up here, 91, goes as the numerator, and then since I have 2 spots, tenths, hundredths, I need to put 100 as my denominator. So 2.91 is 2 and 91 hundredths. Let's look at another example. I have 8.002, so 8 is my whole number, so it goes over there. 2 is what I have after the decimal, so 2 goes on top over here. And since I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, I need to put 1,000 as my denominator. So my fraction or mixed number is 8 and 2 1,000ths. Let's look at a 100 block. Now whether we have a 100 block or a 10 block, what we have to do is count the parts that are filled and put that over either 10 or 100, or even if it's 1,000 block, then it goes over 1,000. What I did here is I counted how many there's 10 dots right here, or 10 squares going in each spot, in each column. So I said that in this column there are 10 tenths that are shaded, and there are 10 tenths shaded here, and 10 tenths shaded here, and only 6 tenths shaded here, and then 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So then I just counted up 10, 20, 30, 6. So I put 36 as my numerator, and 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So I put 100 down there. That's not how we really count fractions, but it might help you when you're trying to identify a hundreds block, what fraction is shaded. Let's go down here next, and what we're doing down here is looking at the value of an underlined digit. This is kind of tricky. You see all of these numbers, 3,219,857. What's the value of that 2? Here's a trick. You take the number that's underlined and you write it below. And then you just match up every other number with a 0. What do you have left? Well, it doesn't matter about this 0. So I just say there's 200,000. So the value of that 2 is 200,000. This one below, it's a 0 now, so I put the 0 down there, match up all my other numbers with zeros, and the value of that is just 0. It's kind of a placeholder to get me to my number of thousands. Okay, now let's look at these two. These are fractions now, so they're going to be less than 1. I find out the underlined digit, and I write it below. I get zeros for everything else. The value of this 2 is 2, and what place value is it in? Right, the hundredths. So this is 2 hundredths. That's the value of that. And you write it in standard form as 0.02. This next one, here's the underline 5, so I put the 5 down here. I replace everything else with zeros, and I have 0.005, which is 5 thousandths. All right, let's move on to putting things in order. I have 3.25, 3.205, and 3.025. First step, stack them. And make sure all of your place values are even. So I do that, and I have 333. That doesn't tell me anything, so I go to the next one. 220. That star is indicating that it's the smallest one. It's the only one that's smaller than the other 2. So I take that as my number 1. That's the smallest or least number. And then I look at just these 2, and these are the same, these are the same. All right, this 5 is bigger than this, so this would be the next smallest, and that obviously would be the largest number. So putting them in order would be 3.025, 3.205, and the biggest number is 3.25. The other thing for ordering is like this. the trick or the strategy that I like to use is to take this number and write it down underneath there, and then I do what I just did right here, where I compare the numbers starting at the left. 2 and 2 are the same, so go to the next set of digits, the 10th place value. This 8 is smaller than this 9, so this number, the 9, is greater, so I put a greater than symbol. And let's go up to this section here. Ooh, remember this? We have to identify the pattern. In blue, I went and highlighted or made dotted lines to show a full square. Remember, you don't have to fill in those, but sometimes it helps to help find the missing numbers. So I have 0.13. Remember the pattern? As it goes down, it increases by 1/10. So 0.13, 0.23, 33, 43. And then going horizontally or this way, it increases by 1/100th. So 0.43, 0.44, and 0.45. And why don't you pause the video and take a second to fill in the rest of the squares. Good, I'm glad you were able to do that. All right, now let's look at the last section on here, is identifying patterns. So I have these two sets. This is two different sets of numbers. And see if you can identify any patterns in either this one or this one. I'll pause the video and I'll give you a second to do that. Yeah, if you take 3 and multiply it by 2, you get 6. 6 times 2 gives you 12. 12 times 2 gives you 24. 24 times 2 gives you 48. That's kind of a tricky one. And here's another tricky one. What about this bottom one? We have 4, then 6, then 10, then, I mean, there's nothing that you can multiply to get 6, or anything that you could add and then have the same thing go here. But look at this. Right here, if we add 2, we get 6. If we add 4, we get 10. Add 6, add 8. So the pattern would be plus 2, plus 4, plus 6, plus 8. The last thing I want to say to you is, good luck on your first test. I'll see you tomorrow.